Shabbat Shalom. Today our message is brought to us by Mauricio Quintero, and on the parasha is Vaera, and he entitled it, "Do You Hear God's Voice?" But when Moses told this to the Israelites, they would not listen to Moses, for their spirits were crushed by cruel bondage. Shemot 6:9. This week's parasha Vaera which means, "and I appear," begins with a dialogue between the Eternal and Moshe, where God confirms who he is and reveals a new name to humanity. Shemot 6:3 says that the Eternal had previously been known as El Shaddai, or God Almighty, but now he will reveal himself to man under the name of Yud He Vav He. Why? It seems that over time, man has evolved in his thinking and his way of being by trying to supplant the eternal with the ephemeral and transitory. From creation to the Exodus and Shemot, we see human adoration supplanting the eternal with aspects derived from creation without the explanation at their level of knowledge. For example, they worship the sun, the moon, the stars, nature, elements such as fire, water, air, and minerals, and even animals that could produce life or death, such as bulls, sheep, snakes, and so on and so forth. So God revealed himself from that moment as the Almighty God to establish that he is the creator of everything, and that all we perceive in the physical world is contained by him. The idea of the God-man, generated from Nimrod, was now fully established with Pharaoh. Now man would be equal to a god, and Pharaoh claimed that he created everything physical in his empire, as prophesied by Ezekiel when he said, "I am against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, you great monster who lies in the bed of your streams, who says, 'The Nile is my creation, it's mine.'" In Bereshit 47, verses 19 to 20, we read that all of Egypt had been handed over to Pharaoh by Joseph when the Egyptians sold everything to him during the famine, giving up their lands and agreeing to a tax on their produce. Thus, Pharaoh established himself as superior and then became a god-man in the eyes of the people, lord over everything that existed in Egypt and its empire. And under this premise, Israel had been indoctrinated, even coming to consider Pharaoh as its lord. However, God said to Moshe, "I am Yud He Vav He." In other words, Moshe, Adonai is not Pharaoh, as he appears in your eyes and in the eyes of others. Pharaoh is a supplanter, a deceiver. Moshe, I am the one who is over Pharaoh. And from there, he empowered Moshe to act as judge before Pharaoh. We read that the first command given to Moshe at the burning bush was, "Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha." Take off your shoes from your feet. It's like saying, Moshe, the shoes that have guided your way of walking in life have reshaped your thinking. Now you must exchange them. Raglecha can be derived from the Hebrew ragil, meaning a custom. And na'al contains the same letters as na'ul, meaning a padlock. It's as if the Eternal was saying between the letters to Moshe, Moshe, you must change your customs and your way of thinking that up to date have blocked you, have been a padlock that has locked you in. This is essential because if Moshe did not stop seeing Pharaoh as a God-man, he could not have authority over him, nor could he become a liberator, a deliverer, and change the people's slave mentality. Next, the Eternal taught how he would perform his redemption through these four expressions. I am the Eternal, who will take you out from under the bondage of the Egyptians. I will free you from their slavery. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments, and I will take you as my people and will be your God, and you will know that I am the Eternal, your God. Then he described the genealogy of Moshe and Aaron to clarify the issue that Moshe, who appeared as an Egyptian to Israel, was really one of them. Moshe goes before Pharaoh, and in view of the of the self-limitation that Moshe imposed upon himself, God allowed his brother Aaron to act as his spokesman and prophet. God sent them both, instructing Moshe to go before Pharaoh and tell him to let Israel go, to let them go free from Egypt, to free them and to compensate them. Even though Moshe was empowered as a judge for Pharaoh, God told him that Pharaoh would not want to show any weakness, since his honor and his empire were at stake. If Pharaoh recognized that the God of slaves was stronger than the God of the Egyptian, there would most assuredly be a very strong social and religious revolution which could collapse the kingdom. In addition, the lie had been upheld for so long that Pharaoh himself vehemently believed it, leading to his obstinacy, his foolishness, and the hardening of his heart. At the beginning, God allowed the Egyptians to perform magic to equal the power of the Eternal, manifested in the wonders of Aaron's staff, swallowing the Egyptian snakes, the Nile turning into blood, as does all the water in Egypt, frogs invading the land, lice infesting men and beasts, and now, as the magician said, this is the finger of God. Hordes of ferocious animals devastated Egypt. A plague destroyed domestic animals, sores afflicted Egypt, fire and ice descended as devastating hail, and yet, still seeing that he's at a disadvantage, Pharaoh still decides not to relent. However, I'd like to focus on a simple but profound message. At some point in everyone's life, when we are going through difficult times, our confidence and our faith weakens, resulting in spiritual deafness. The sense of hearing is amazing. In fact, it's said that on our deathbed, it is the last sense that we lose. Moshe had managed to change his mind and to come to trust, but this messenger found no echoes in the message that God had given him, because the spirit of the Israelites was crushed on account of their cruel slavery. Rabbi Bahia comments on this portion, saying, the reason was not that they did not believe in God's promise or in his servant Moses, but it was solely due to the lack of breath and hard work. The collective consciousness of the people was very similar to that of an individual who wants to die, but he can no longer bear the pain because he can no longer bear the pain he's enduring. The Rambam adds, it was not because they did not believe in God and his prophet that they did not listen. Rather, they did not heed his words out of impatience of spirit, like a person whose soul is afflicted by its misery and who does not want to live a moment longer in its suffering, even though he knows he will later be relieved. Rashi says they did not listen to Moshe. That is, they did not accept his words of comfort. In this case, the commentaries speak of the anguish manifesting itself in a type of short, continuous breathing, shortness of breath, and difficulty breathing. I don't know what situation those who are hearing this message might be in. On one hand, you might be on Moshe's side, happy to share your joy in the treasure you find in the Torah. But have you established a deep relationship with the person who's listening to you? In that moment, could Moshe perceive the reason they didn't listen to him? Since the answer was not derived from the messenger's reflection, but from a third party. On the other hand, we can also be the receiver of the message. But what is our condition? Impatient in spirit that doesn't have time to sit down and concentrate and put attention to a message? Distressed with physical symptoms in your breathing? Burdened with work and stress, with physical pain, whether at work, physical abuse, or illness? I think that at this moment, Moshe could not perceive the Eternal's eyes of mercy, like an understanding father who understands the environment of his children. I don't know if frustration went through his head because he was the special envoy and his words did not resonate. Maybe he even felt useless. I don't know. But on the other hand, the receiver, focused on his reality, could not open his eyes to any other possibilities because the center of his attention was on what made him a slave, who could not raise his eyes or dare to open his mind. What then is a solution? How can we open our ears? I think the answer is in what we call in Pesach the 4 cups of redemption, which is our custom to enunciate at the Seder. That is, it's not a commandment in the Torah, but it's a beautiful custom. We then find 4 aspects in which each step to liberation is higher than the previous one. Let's examine them. First, God knows that he must deal with their physical needs. One cannot deal with the soul when there is no physical freedom. That's why he speaks of, I will bring you out from under the bondage of the Egyptian. This is something physical. Can you concentrate on a service? If, for example, you have a headache, if you've had a blow that does not allow you to move, this is the first step. Relieve physical suffering. Second, the level of complexity was raised in the short term when it says that God heard Israel's groaning. Not a prayer, a groan is a basic expression of physical suffering, expressing nothing more than pain. Now in verse 5, it says that God did not see their slavery. God saw their servitude. And later in verse 6, it says, I will free you from their servitude. What then is servitude? Servitude is the mental state that makes free people behave like slaves. It's the feeling that I must continue serving even though our service is no longer required. For example, I remember that we had a nanny who helped us raise our children when they were small, and she also helped us with household chores. Sometimes she would stay in the city for the weekend because she wanted to run some personal errands, and she would stay at our house. On the weekend, she wasn't our employee. She was our guest. In fact, we would invite her to eat so that she could rest. And even if we went to a restaurant where she didn't have to do anything, in her mind, she was still working. Because in the restaurant, she would clear our plates as if she were working at home. This is servitude. You are free, but you continue to act like a slave out of habit, instinct, or whatever adjective you want to call it. In other words, this oppression is in the mind. There are people who continue to think that they are bad, that they are useless, that they can't, that they are alcoholics, etc. You are free. Learn to look at yourselves in the eyes that the Eternal sees you. Third, I will redeem you. That is, I will pay a price for you. Our freedom is not free. It comes at a cost. We were also Pharaoh's property. Now, God is not a thief. He would not snatch another's property. He would behave under the highest ethics, and he would buy us. What was our value? An outstretched arm and great judgments. This would give us a new nationality. We would no longer be Egyptians. We would now be a new nation, which implies agreeing to live under the laws of the nation. And that nation, the law, was the Torah. This involves not only the body, but the soul. And fourth, I will take you as my people. Now that we've decided to live under his kingdom, under his laws, now he can say, you are my citizens. You are my property. The difference is that God rules us with love and kindness, with mercy and perfect judgment, while Pharaoh ruled his with oppression, pain, and cruelty. Do you want to hear God's voice? Don't be impatient in spirit. Free yourself from your troubles and reduce your stress level. In Tehillim 34, 5 and 7, David said, I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my terror, all my fears. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him, and delivered him from all his troubles. If he had not been delivered, he could not have said, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall ever be in my mouth. Do you know when David wrote this? When he was a slave to Saul. He had fled to the land of Achish, and such was his distress, his bondage, that he pretended to be mad, a form of slavery and physical oppression, and then he ran away to live in a cave. He may not have heard God's voice at that time, but like Israel, God delivered him, in this case, from his fear. My prayer is that God grants us the ability to hear his voice at all times. Shabbat Shalom.